Hey guys, tonight we begin in a place that smells overwhelmingly like hay, wet leather, and optimism that's about to be disappointed. You're standing in a medieval stable where straw crunches underfoot and horses breathe clouds into the chill, morning air. You're not here as a noble or a knight. No shining armor for you. No, tonight you are a horse. Specifically, a war horse, a destrier in training, a soon-to-be four-legged freight train of medieval valor. But for now, you're just small, wobbly, curious, sniffing at a wooden bucket like it might bite first. You're born into a world where your destiny isn't yours. You don't choose this path. Your bloodline does. You're what they call good stock. Broad chest, strong legs, good bone, not too jittery, but not so calm they think you're lazy. You're a checklist in horse form. The stable hands are already sizing you up. That one with the missing eyebrow. He's muttering something about your hocks, the older one with the crooked hat. He's thinking you'll be too stubborn. Joke's on them. You're still figuring out how to stand up without face planting into your own shadow. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first weeks are a blur of stumbling and suckling, sleeping in the straw, and learning that humans are loud, unpredictable creatures with endless opinions about your feet. The blacksmith visits early, just to check alignment, they say. He smells like ash and has hands like tree bark. You don't like him yet, but you love your mother. She nuzzles your ears, blocks the wind with her flank, and sighs deeply. When the stable hands gossip about the new foals, she's seen it all. She knows some of you will be sold, some traded, and a few, like you, will be chosen. The chosen ones get trained, and training is just a kind way of saying, taught to be brave when everything inside you screams, run. Flags flapping, ignore them. Drums, get used to it. Fire, you will walk through it. No, really, they'll make you. And it all begins here, in the low timber-framed stable, with your name scratched in chalk on a wooden slate and a bucket that smells like oats but tastes like despair. Tonight's historical fact. War horses like the famed destriers weren't just random draft animals slapped with armor. They were specifically bred and trained for battle. Think of them as living tanks, expensive, powerful, and very, very stubborn, and your quirky tidbit. Some medieval breeders believed foals born under a full moon were more courageous, so much so that they would rearrange breeding schedules based on lunar cycles. Whether or not it worked is debatable, but it certainly made for dramatic calendar planning. Historians still argue whether destriers were truly a distinct breed or more of a category. Some believe they were just particularly well-built horses trained for combat, while others suggest specific bloodlines existed, passed down and guarded like family secrets. You yawn, you lie down in the straw. The stable creaks as the wind rolls in. And for a moment, despite everything, you feel safe. A small body with a large future. A name no one has spoken yet, but they will, soon. Your legs are longer now, but they still feel like someone else's stilts. You've mastered the art of standing without toppling, and you only fall over when something really demands it, like an unexpected sparrow or the terrifying rustle of a nearby sack. Still, they call this progress. You're not quite a horse yet. You're a foal on the cusp of responsibility, which in medieval warhorse terms means one thing. Your destiny is galloping straight at you, and it's wearing spurs. You're introduced to the halter next. Leather, scratchy, undignified. A loop around your head that says, "Congratulations, you now belong to people." The first time they slip it on, you chew it like it's a snack. Spoiler, it is not. It tastes like dry bark and old rain. Then the rope comes, and that's when the tugging begins. Walk here, stand there, back up, turn around. You'd think you were preparing for a parade, but no, this is military conditioning in disguise. Your handler, a boy with a straw hat that's seen better centuries, clicks his tongue and mutters things like, "Good lad, and don't be daft." He's kind enough, though his shoes squeak when he walks, which is unnerving. You're herded into a paddock with others your age, some more jittery, some already puffing their chests like tiny warlords. You size each other up with the slow, judgmental look only young creatures know how to give. There are minor scuffles. You learn to kick without warning. It's considered polite. Training escalates. Blankets go on your back. Then weights. Then a small boy who shouts, "Huzzah!" while holding your mane like a knight in a children's play. You buck him off the first time. He lands in a barrel. Everyone pretends not to laugh. You become infamous for a day. Tonight's historical fact. Medieval warhorses typically began training as young as 2 years old. While they weren't ridden into battle at that age, groundwork and desensitization started early, responding to voice, wearing blankets, and tolerating noise. Their future riders wanted fearless mounts, which means your childhood was, essentially, one long boot camp and a quirky tidbit. In some regions of Europe, foals were introduced to armor-like objects by draping them with pots and pans. The clatter was meant to simulate the sound of future chaos, battlefields, parades, nightly falls. Some foals adjusted, others screamed and ran. One reportedly destroyed a chicken coop. Historians still argue whether warhorse training was centralized or adapted from local customs. Some monasteries kept detailed records of horse conditioning routines, while other regions left it entirely up to noble households. This led to wildly inconsistent methods, ranging from near scholarly to completely improvised. You, of course, are part of the scholarly end, or so your handlers claim. Just before tossing a flag at your face to test your reaction time, you don't flinch. Well, you flinch slightly, but they call it bravery anyway. Your hooves grow harder with use. You're led across gravel, stones, and bridges. Water, it turns out, is not your enemy, but pigeons remain suspicious. There's a moment, weeks from now, when they'll place a small wooden shield near your feed bucket, just to see what you do. You'll ignore it. You're too busy chewing. This, they'll say, is the sign of a true destrier in the making. You'll be proud, you'll be confused, you'll be fed, which, let's be honest, is what really matters. You wake to drums, not in a poetic, dramatic sense, just literally. There's a boy in the yard thumping on a battered skin drum like he's trying to scare ghosts. It's part of your training now. Learn to love the chaos, or at least stop trying to climb a fence every time it happens. You are officially in the desensitization phase, which is a fancy way of saying everyone wants you to be brave in increasingly absurd situations. Today's challenge: flapping flags. Big, small, red, blue, flung around like oversized butterflies having a nervous breakdown. They whip in the wind, flap in your face, and make absolutely no sense. You try very hard not to panic. On the third pass, you snort and pretend you're only startled because a beetle crawled across your hoof. Dignity matters. Then come the fire drills. No, not exits and meeting points. Literal fire. They light small torches, wave them around, and sometimes walk them under your belly. The first time, you backpedal so fast you knock over a bucket, a broom, and someone's lunch. But eventually, you hold your ground. The handlers cheer like you've just composed a symphony. After that, they bring out the wooden weapons. Not for you to hold, obviously. Your hoof dexterity is appalling, but for waving near your face. Lances, swords, spears. They clatter. They sparkle. Occasionally, they drop one. You flinch, but only slightly. Good enough. Your handler starts riding you in short spurts now. Not charging, just walking, turning, backing up. You hate backing up. It feels unnatural. Your tail gets twitchy, but you learn. Because when you don't, he sighs dramatically and says things like, "You're lucky you're handsome. Speaking of handsome, your mane is growing out." There are debates over whether to braid it for parades. You roll your eyes. They miss it entirely, but you do it anyway. Tonight's historical fact: desensitization training was a key component of preparing war horses. They had to become immune to loud noises, sudden movements, even fire, often through repeated exposure. A war horse couldn't afford to spook. In battle, hesitation could get both horse and rider killed. Your quirky tidbit. Some horses were exposed to theatre troupes as part of training. Travelling performers were considered ideal for testing a horse's nerve. Bright costumes, loud voices, strange props. One document references a stallion who was specifically terrified of jesters. He reportedly refused to charge near anyone wearing bells. Historians still argue whether war horses were truly fearless or just exceptionally well conditioned. Some accounts praise destriers for their calm under pressure. Others note incidents where horses bolted mid-charge or refused to cross moats. Bravery, it turns out, was often situational. Today, your bravery is rewarded with oats and a good brushing. Your handler hums while he works, off-key but warm. You stand still, except for one ear that twitches every time he hits a flat note. You're becoming something powerful now, not just strong, but focused. Tomorrow, they'll tie ribbons on your bridle and parade you through the village square. You will try to eat one. You will be scolded. But someone will call you magnificent, and you'll decide to believe them just this once. The first time you meet your groom, he's asleep in your stall, face down in straw, snoring like someone has given up on everything except horizontal rest. You nudge him gently. He startles, flails, and mutters something about missing the rooster. Call. You both stare at each other for a moment, sizing each other up. He smells like onions and honesty. This is the beginning of a very strange friendship. His name doesn't matter, not because he isn't important, but because he never bothers to say it more than once. You call him the groom. Everyone does, even the Lord's page. He is young, but his hands are old, cracked, calloused, and permanently stained with saddle grease. He wears 2 belts at all times, one for tools and one for snacks. He never uses the correct one. He talks to you more than he talks to anyone else, probably because you don't talk back. Well, not with words, he says, while brushing out your mane. But I know your moods, and to be fair, he does. You swish your tail, twice. He knows you're irritated. You flick your left ear. He knows you're worried. You roll your eyes dramatically. He sighs and says, "Don't be rude." He grooms you each morning with sleepy efficiency, humming tunelessly and commenting on the absurdity of nobility. Sir Aldrich changed his mind. "Again," he says one day, brushing your flank. Now he wants to dye the saddlecloth blue, like you care. He keeps you clean, polished, and prepared for the absurd pageantry of being someone's steed. You repay him by not biting him. Most days. Your training continues, but now it's filtered through the groom's routines. He sneaks you better oats, hides apples in his sleeves, and always scratches the itchy spot just under your withers. He might be sleep-deprived, sarcastic, and constantly covered in hay, but he's your anchor. Tonight's historical fact. Grooms in the medieval period were not just stable boys. They were essential to the health and performance of war horses. Their responsibilities included grooming, feeding, checking hooves, adjusting tack, and providing companionship. A good groom knew a horse better than its rider ever would. And your fringe detail. Some grooms were so respected they were buried with the horses they served. Others, however, were famously cranky. There are letters from knights complaining that their grooms muttered insults to the horses and refused to polish armor on feast days. One groom reportedly taught his horse to respond only to rude commands in Flemish. Historians still argue whether grooms held real status or were merely tolerated servants. Some castles gave them quarters near the lord's own horses. Others assigned them lower wages than cooks. Regardless, no trained warhorse functioned well without one. You begin to recognize the groom's moods too. When he's humming, he's content. When he's muttering, he's worried. When he talks to your saddle like it insulted his sister, something's wrong. You learn to nuzzle him when he's quiet too long. He pretends not to like it, but he leaves an extra apple in your bucket. That night, you pretend not to notice. Armor Day is loud, not because you're stomping around like a thundercloud, but because metal has a way of clanging against everything it touches, including itself. And today, they're fitting you for your first set of barding. That's horse. Armor, in case no one told you. Fancy, heavy, and about as comfortable as sleeping in a pantry full of pots. You stand in the center of the yard while half a dozen men argue about girths, padding, and whether your shoulders are broad enough to carry honor. You snort dramatically, which they ignore. The first piece they try is the crinette, a set of segmented plates that rest along your neck. It's not too bad, until someone drops a rivet down your withers and pretends it didn't happen. The groom retrieves it with all the flair of someone who's done this before. "You're doing fine," he whispers to you, even though his hands are shaking from holding the crupper in place. Next comes the patral, the chest plate. It's supposed to protect your heart. It mostly makes you feel like a shelf. And then, the flanchards. Those go over your flanks. You now creak when you walk. You sound like a wardrobe trying to sneak through a hallway. They save the chanfron, the faceplate, for last. It's adorned with a tiny spike and a decorative swirl. You think it looks ridiculous. The stable hands call it regal. The groom calls it a silver migraine. Tonight's historical fact. Medieval war horses were indeed fitted with elaborate armor, especially during the late Middle Ages, when cavalry charges were considered decisive in battle. Barding could include mail or plate components, often customized for specific horses and engraved for prestige. Your quirky tidbit. Some horses had armor with tiny family crests etched near the ears, not for visibility, but as an inside joke among the smiths. One surviving chanfron includes a carving of a duck, despite the horse never being involved in water combat. Smiths had humor, or boredom. Historians still debate how often full barding was actually used in battle. It was incredibly heavy and expensive, and not every campaign had the resources to armor both man and horse. Some argue that barding was more common in tournaments and ceremonies than on muddy, chaotic fields. Today, your armor is more symbolic than functional. No one's sending you off to war yet, but they want to see how you carry it, how you move under pressure, how you respond when your ears are slightly pinched by an iron crown. You manage, you trot a little. Someone claps. The groom mutters, "Overkill," but tightens your girth with the care of someone who's seen worse. You make it through the day without stepping on anyone, which is apparently cause for celebration. That night, your coat is rubbed down with vinegar and lavender, oil. You smell like a salad, but at least you're clean. The armor is stored in a chest too ornate for comfort. You are fed carrots. And for once, you sleep deeply, despite the pressure of a crown still lingering around your ears. You are walking. Again. If you had a banner, it would say, "Still walking." Not charging, not galloping. Just an endless series of hooves clopping over packed earth, pebbles, muddy ruts, and the occasional squashed cabbage. You're part of a nobleman's train now, which means you go where he goes. And where he goes, apparently, is everywhere. You're not alone. There are 5 other horses, some carrying squires, some bearing tents, armor, or a comically large cooking pot. You have the prestigious honor of carrying Sir Aldrich himself. He snores on horseback, loudly. Sometimes he drools into your mane. Your back itches constantly. The groom follows in a creaky cart with supplies. You catch glimpses of him grumbling and adjusting straps that weren't meant to be adjusted. He waves at you occasionally. You flick your ears in return. It's the equine version of a handshake. Marching is boring, but not easy. The terrain changes every day. Steep hills, sticky bogs, rickety bridges that seem built more for birds than war horses. You learn to step carefully. One wrong move, and someone shouts, "Watch it!" like you were the one who invented potholes. You stop, often, but never for long. Sometimes the stops are worse. Flies descend in biblical swarms. There's always one soldier who sings off key. Someone is always sharpening something. Tonight's historical fact: during campaigns, war horses could march dozens of miles in a single day, often with little rest. Unlike draft horses or pack animals, destriers carried not only heavy men in armor, but their own gear, making them walking fortresses that never got a break. Your fringe tidbit. In some armies, horses were given a kind of medieval passport, brands, or insignias on their hindquarters to mark ownership and allegiance. This meant if your rider was a little ambitious in a tavern brawl, everyone knew which lord to blame when his horse was found tied to a bakery. Historians still argue about how much care horses received during campaigns. Some chronicles describe noblemen weeping over fallen mounts. Others mention horses being eaten when supplies ran low. It likely varied by wealth, climate, and whether or not your rider thought you were a good lad. Sir Aldrich thinks you're excellent, mostly because you don't buck him off when he's half asleep, also because you never step in the campfire. Apparently, the last horse did. The groom brushes you every night, muttering about saddle sores and tight straps. He grumbles about Sir Aldrich's weight, then slips you a sugar cube and apologizes on behalf of the human race. You chew thoughtfully and decide to forgive him. You fall asleep to the sound of sharpening stones, distant laughter, and the rain beginning its nightly tap dance on the canvas tents. You dream of fields and walking, always walking. You wake up before the sun rises, not because you're especially motivated, but because a rooster has decided to scream directly into your soul. The camp is already alive with the subtle chaos of morning. Men trip over ropes, pots clatter. Someone sneezes hard enough to scare a mule. You stretch your legs, shake off the dew, and take a long, dramatic sniff of the air. You immediately regret it. Today, you're getting a full dose of the smells of a medieval camp, and they are complex. Let's start with the basics. Mud. You are standing in it. Your hooves are caked in it. It has ambitions. It wants to become part of you permanently. Then there's smoke. Wood smoke from the cook fires, which you wouldn't mind if it didn't cling to your mane like a stubborn perfume. The cooks are boiling something that might be soup, but smells more like sadness and old onions. You know better than to try and taste it. Once was enough. As you walk through camp with the groom at your lead, you encounter other sensory highlights. There's the scent of steel. Sharpened swords and polished armor have their own tang. Leather oil, sweat, and damp wool add additional layers to the mix. Then comes the bouquet of humans who haven't bathed in several days but insist on standing. Very close to each other, it's a lot. The groom doesn't notice. He just hums and throws a blanket over your back to warm you up. You sigh dramatically. He nods as if to say, "Yes, I smell it too," and tightens your girth. Today, there's a drill, a practice charge. That means extra hay for breakfast, finally. But it also means standing next to 20 other horses, while a man with no concept of indoor voices yells at everyone about formation integrity. You wait your turn to trot. You avoid the large puddle. You stand patiently while Sir Aldrich tries to mount from the wrong side again. You consider moving, but decide against it. You're learning restraint. It's exhausting. Tonight's historical fact. Medieval military camps were notorious for their filth. Even elite encampments suffered from poor sanitation. The stench of unwashed soldiers, waste, rotting food, and horse dung mixed with smoke created a unique environment. Horses were often stabled in makeshift paddocks, just far enough from the camp to prevent an all-out revolt from the senses. And your fringe tidbit, there are records of horses developing specific dislikes for certain camp smells. One warhorse allegedly refused to approach the latrine trench. Another reared at the scent of garlic stew, leading some to believe the dish was cursed. The truth? Probably just bad garlic. Historians still debate how much attention was paid to the olfactory experience of horses during campaigns. Some argue that war horses were toughened by exposure to everything. Others point out that overly stressed animals could become unpredictable. The answer may lie somewhere between noble steed and very tired barn dog. By midday, you've grown used to it. Or perhaps your nose has given up. Either way, you march on. Sir Aldrich finally remembers which side to mount from. The groom gives you a knowing pat. You survive the drill, and that night, the wind shifts just enough to bring the faintest scent of grass from the nearby hills. You close your eyes, and for a moment, it almost smells like home. Let's talk about food, not feasts or banquets. Those are for people with thumbs and politics. You're a warhorse. Your culinary journey consists mostly of hay, oats, and the occasional treat if your rider remembers you're alive outside of battle. And today you're dealing with campaign rations, the kind of meals that would make even a goat pause. Breakfast is hay. Always hay. Dry, fibrous, vaguely warm if you're lucky. It's not exciting, but it's reliable. Then, there are the oats, rationed tightly, stored in leather sacks that someone always forgets to tie properly. Once, a sack split open near your feed bucket, and for one glorious moment, you felt like royalty. The camp cook occasionally tries to offer you supplemental feed. Translation: scraps, wilted greens, leftover grain mash, and once, a turnip that had clearly lost the will to live. You gave it a sniff and walked away. The groom whispered, "Good lad," and slipped you an apple core later. And then there's water. Clean water is a luxury, especially during long marches. You drink from barrels, streams, and buckets that have been used to soak laundry. You develop a taste for whatever's available, which includes the occasional frog if you're not. Careful. You are what you eat, they say. If that's true, you are 70% hay, 20% regret, and 10% stolen treats. Tonight's historical fact: the diet of a medieval warhorse varied depending on rank, region, and campaign conditions. Ideally, destriers were fed generous portions of oats, hay, and legumes. In practice, warhorses often survived on limited rations, especially during prolonged military operations. Oats were highly valued and often reserved for horses over human soldiers. Your quirky tidbit. Some knights believed feeding a warhorse a mash of oats mixed with mead before battle would stir the blood. Others insisted carrots made a horse disloyal. There's one account of a lord who banned root vegetables from his stables entirely because he believed they made his steed brooding. Historians still argue whether certain breeds required specific diets, or if those were romanticized accounts, written by nobles with more money than livestock experience. What's certain is that access to good feed often meant the difference between a mount that could charge and one that collapsed halfway to glory. You, at least, are lucky. The groom likes you. That means your feed bucket is always full enough, even when the soldiers complain. He's even been known to smuggle treats. Last week, it was half a pear. Today, it's a handful of dried figs. You chew thoughtfully while a distant trumpet squawks. It's confusion. A squire runs past chasing a chicken. You flick your tail and decide not to move. Dinner, after all, is the one time no one expects you to be heroic. You finish your hay. You sip water from a barrel that smells faintly of soap. And, as the sky darkens, you watch the camp settle like a blanket unraveling slowly over the hills. You know it's blacksmith day by the smell alone. Charcoal smoke, scorched hoof trimmings, and something that can only be described as hot metal regret hang in the air like a warning. The blacksmith is already here, shirt half buttoned, arms like barrels, and a voice that sounds like gravel being poured down a chimney. You don't dislike him, but let's be honest, he makes you nervous. Today, you need new shoes, not the velvet kind. Iron, fitted and nailed in with a level of casual. Violence you're still not entirely comfortable with. The groom is here, of course. He holds your reins, whispers nonsense in your ear. It's just a quick trim, lad, and tries to pretend he isn't just as anxious as you are. The farrier gives you a cursory pat, which feels like being hit with a log, and then proceeds to lift your front hoof like it's a sack of flour. You shift your weight dramatically. He mutters something that sounds like a challenge. You pretend not to understand. First comes the hoof pick. Fine. Then the rasp. Scraping, filing, shaping. Then comes the trimming blade. You flinch a little, but you stay still. Mostly. The groom tightens his grip and says something sarcastic about your last shoeing where you kicked over a tool tray. It wasn't your fault. The tray was being smug. Then comes the hot shoe, heated in the portable forge, glowing faintly orange. The smith places it against your hoof. Smoke curls upward. You smell yourself burning. You consider quitting everything and becoming a decorative cart horse in a monastery. But you hold still. You're better at this now. Once the shoe cools, the smith nails it in with practiced rhythm. Tap, tap, thunk, thunk. Your hoof vibrates. You imagine it's music. Bad music, but it keeps the beat. Tonight's historical fact. Medieval horseshoes were usually made of iron and were critical to a warhorse's endurance on rough terrain. Farriers travelled with armies and had to maintain a near-constant schedule of trimming and shoeing. Warhorses, like destriers, often had customized shoes for weight distribution and traction. Your quirky tidbit. Some superstitious riders believed nailing the seventh shoe of a campaign onto a horse backwards would ward off ambushes. One nobleman insisted his shoes be cooled in wine. Another believed whispering compliments to the hoof before shoeing would make the horse step with pride. Historians still argue about the frequency and quality of medieval hoof care. While nobles invested in the upkeep of valuable mounts, common cavalry horses often went long periods without proper trimming. Some believe shoeing techniques varied. so much between regions that horseshoes themselves are used as archaeological fingerprints. The smith finishes his work, wipes sweat from his brow, and nods once. Approval, maybe. Or a challenge. Hard to tell with smiths. The groom leads you back to your post, pausing only to give your foreleg an affectionate slap. "Didn't kill anyone this time," he says. "Progress. You are rewarded with a rubdown and a bucket of water that tastes like moss and faint victory. You stomp each hoof once, testing your new shoes. You feel heavier, but also, somehow, more complete." That night, the stars blink softly above your paddock, and your dreams are full of hammers and hooves. There's excitement in the air this morning, thick and jittery, like someone accidentally spilled too much sugar into the sunrise. The camp is buzzing, armor is being polished, banners unfurled, and men are checking straps like their lives depend on it, which, to be fair, they might. It's tournament day, not war exactly, more like war's flamboyant cousin with better hair. You're not sure if this is better or worse than actual combat. There's more cheering, but also more feathers. Your groom arrives early, carrying an absurdly shiny bridle and a saddle that smells like oiled leather and misplaced confidence. "Don't look at me like that," he says. "We're not storming a castle. We're just galloping in circles so Sir Aldrich can impress a lady with excessive shoulder pads. You are dressed like royalty. Your barding is embroidered. Your mane is brushed into something approaching elegance. You are the physical embodiment of pageantry." Then Sir Aldrich arrives. He's wearing a plumed helmet and a grin that says, "I've practiced my entrance face in a mirror." He pats your neck with a gauntlet that's too cold, too heavy, and entirely unnecessary. "Let's win honor today," he says, mostly to himself. You sigh and accept your fate. The tournament field is chaos, flags snapping in the wind, trumpets bleating awkwardly, and horses you've never met stomping about like they own the place. There's a crowd, people are cheering. One boy throws a turnip, not at you, at a knight dressed entirely in yellow, who looks offended by everything, especially turnips. You line up for the joust. Sir Aldrich adjusts his grip on the lance. You consider adjusting your stance in protest, but decide against it. You're already in front of the nobles. No need for a scene. The charge is announced. Trumpets sound. The crowd roars. You move. It's not full gallop, not yet. Just a build-up. Hooves thudding, armor rattling, wind slicing past your ears. You charge straight and true, ignoring the weight on your back and the feather tickling your forehead. Sir Aldrich's lance misses, of course. He gets clipped in the shoulder and nearly loses his balance. You slow just in time to avoid trampling, a squire holding a tray of apples. You return to the lineup. You do this 3 more times. Each time, Aldrich performs slightly better, and you remain entirely unimpressed. Tonight's historical fact. Medieval tournaments were elaborate, ritualized events often held for practice, celebration, or political theatre. War horses were as essential as their riders, and were often groomed and armored specifically for the occasion. The event required as much stamina as real combat, and possibly more drama. Your quirky tidbit? Some horses were trained to bow during parades or rear up during introductions. One notorious destrier named Beauregard was trained to relieve himself dramatically before every match, causing delays and much gossip. He remained undefeated in 5 tournaments. Historians still argue about how dangerous tournaments were compared to actual warfare. Some accounts describe knights dying from broken lances or internal injuries. Others claim tournaments were more about spectacle and social rank than skill. The truth likely lies somewhere between bruised egos and shattered ribs. By the end of the day, you're exhausted. not from the running, but from the attention. Sir Aldrich declares victory despite coming in third. The groom rolls his eyes and removes your tack, muttering, "One day you'll get a night with a grip." You're given an extra ration of oats and a rub down with lavender oil. You fall asleep with the faint scent of roasted meat in the distance and the memory of trumpets echoing in your ears, and you dream not of battle, but of fields with no flags and silence thick as clover. You're not just a horse anymore. You're a noble steed, a symbol, a moving monument to status, pride, and perfectly stitched saddlecloths, or so everyone keeps telling you. Today, you're being fitted for your formal gear, which includes ornamental barding, polished tack, and a new saddle that creaks every time anyone breathes near it. This isn't for battle or tournaments. This is for showing off. Sir Aldrich is preparing for a ceremonial procession, an event so spectacularly self-important, it requires 4 squires, 2 trumpeters, and a 5th boy whose entire job is to wave a banner near your flank without startling you. You're not entirely convinced he's qualified. The groom brushes you twice, checks your hooves, and sighs dramatically. "You're the finest beast in this ridiculous circus," he mutters. "Try not to sneeze on the Viscount again." You try. Really you do. But the feathered plume they've attached to your head is outrageously ticklish, and the nobleman standing near you smells like pickled garlic. So when you sneeze, loudly and with feeling, it's technically not your fault. The groom quietly rewards you with a sugar cube later. You walk through cobbled streets beneath banners that flap lazily in the sun. Children cheer, nobles nod, peasants gawk. You trot in rhythm, head high, tail lifted like you know you're part of history. The real trouble, however, is the saddle. It's new, it's tight, and it's rubbing your spine in a way that suggests whoever designed it had never met a horse, or possibly a spine. Every few steps it squeaks, groans, or pinches. You toss your head once, the crowd thinks you're showing off. You're just trying to readjust without launching Aldrich into the bakery. Tonight's historical fact. In medieval society, horses, especially destriers, were more than tools of war. They were status symbols, bred and trained for ceremonial, duties, parades, and diplomatic appearances. The most impressive steeds were often reserved for processions, dressed in velvet barding and gold-stitched tack. Your quirky tidbit: there's a record of one noble whose horse wore a tiny mirrored plate on its forehead to reflect sunlight in a divine manner. Another lord reportedly dyed his steed's mane with berry juice before parades to match the family crest. The horse was unimpressed. Historians still argue whether the nobility's ceremonial treatment of horses reflected genuine respect or theatrical vanity. Some chronicles praise the bond between lord and steed. Others suggest these parades were more for ego than equine welfare. Either way, the horses had little say. You endure the procession like a professional. You prance, pause, and pose. You don't trip. You don't kick. You only roll your eyes when no one's looking. When it's all over, the groom removes the saddle with a groan and massages the sore spots on your back. "I'd set that thing on fire if they'd let me," he mutters. You believe him. He rubs lavender oil into your neck, and you lean into it. You're not just a horse anymore. You're a symbol, but symbols still need scratching behind the ears. The camp is quiet. Too quiet. No trumpet drills, no sparring practice, no awkwardly loud clanging from knights trying to impress someone. Even the groom is whispering. That's how you know something's different. It's the day before battle. Everything is being cleaned, polished, tightened, checked. Saddles are restitched. Armor is wiped with oil until it gleams. And the foot soldiers are unusually focused on sharpening things, swords, spears, and possibly their own nerves. You feel it too, not fear exactly, but something old, something baked into your bones over generations. You were bred for this. You were trained for this. And yet, your ears twitch at every sound. A raven flaps overhead, and you flinch just slightly before catching yourself. The groom is brushing your legs slowly, not saying much. He's usually full of grumbles and muttered commentary, but today he's quiet, not solemn, just present, focused. Every strap he checks is double-checked. Every buckle gets a final tug. Sir Aldrich appears, but he doesn't talk much either. He's in half armor, already pacing near the fire. At one point he kneels by your flank, not praying exactly, but thinking, maybe remembering, maybe wondering if you'll both be coming back from whatever happens tomorrow. You nudge his elbow, gently. He doesn't flinch, just pats your shoulder, like you're a very large, very dangerous pet. Tonight's historical fact. On the eve of battle, war horses were often treated with unusual reverence. Knights would check their tack obsessively, feed their mounts a little better than usual, and sometimes speak to them as comrades. Some even wrote their horses' names into wills, ensuring care if they didn't return. Your quirky tidbit. One knight in Burgundy insisted on sleeping beside his horse the night before every battle. He believed it aligned their spirits. Another swore by rubbing rosemary oil into his horse's mane before dawn, claiming it summoned fortune. That horse, reportedly, hated rosemary. Historians still argue whether such rituals were rooted in strategy, superstition, or genuine affection. Some sources suggest horses were viewed purely as assets. Others describe tearful farewells, whispered promises, and even songs sung quietly into a steed's ear the night before war. The groom hums a little as he finishes brushing your flanks. The fire crackles softly. The men eat in silence. You chew your hay more slowly tonight. Your tack is already laid out nearby, polished, heavy, familiar. So Aldrich will rise early. The groom will have you ready before the sun crests the trees. But for now, this moment, you rest, wrapped in the quiet hush of something big and ancient and unspoken. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to listen, to wind, to fire, to your own breath, and the soft, steady heartbeat of a camp waiting for morning. The morning arrives heavy and pale. The sky hangs low, like it's trying to keep you grounded. There's no birdsong, just the soft clink of chainmail, the rhythm of boots on, wet grass, and the long exhale of men trying to look fearless. You are led from your stall in near silence. Your armor is cold, your tack is snug. Every buckle fastened by hands that move with muscle memory and not a hint of doubt. The groom doesn't speak, but his fingers linger longer on each strap. You nuzzle his shoulder. He pretends not to notice. Sir Aldrich mounts, up with practiced grace. Today, his plume is shorter, his lance sharper. He leans forward slightly in the saddle, not for balance, for speed. You wait at the edge of the camp. Other horses line up beside you. You smell leather oil, sweat, the iron tang of weaponry. You feel the weight of the formation, tightly coiled energy, like a bowstring pulled back too far. Then the horn sounds, one long rising note. You move, slow at first, just a walk, a heartbeat, then a trot, then a gallop, and then everything becomes speed. The ground vanishes beneath you, replaced by thunder. You are no longer stepping, you are flying, 4 hooves striking the earth like drums in perfect rhythm. Armor rattles, lances lower, the air tears past your ears. Ahead, a wall of sound, screams, steel, banners whipping, in wind and chaos. The earth shakes beneath you, though you're not sure whether from hooves or from history. You don't think, you don't blink, you charge. Tonight's historical fact: a cavalry charge in the medieval period was one of the most terrifying and awe-inspiring sights on the battlefield. War horses like destriers were trained to run full tilt into formations of enemy troops, often breaking lines with sheer momentum. The charge was a deadly ballet of coordination between horse and rider. Your quirky tidbit. Some horses were trained to bite enemy soldiers. Yes, bite. Destriers, particularly stallions, could be taught to lash out with teeth and hooves in close combat. There's even a record of a horse named Thistle, who reportedly disarmed a footman by yanking his polearm with its teeth. Historians still debate how decisive cavalry charges really were. Some battles were won by the sheer force of the charge. Others turned into chaotic entanglements, where horses panicked and formations collapsed. Some scholars suggest the myth of the unstoppable knight is just that, a myth built on stories shouted louder than others. You push forward, hooves sinking slightly into churned earth, mud flicking behind you like ink strokes on parchment. Sir, Aldrich shouts something. You don't hear it, you feel it. You crash through the front line, splinters of wood, the clash of shields, a scream cut short. Then it's all blur. You move, because there is no option not to. You dodge, you swerve, you survive. When the horn blows again, this time a lower tone, you pull back. Not instantly, but gradually. You slow from gallop to trot, breath heaving, foam streaking your bit. Sir Aldrich is still seated, dirt-smudged, wide-eyed, silent. You return to camp half mad with adrenaline and half asleep with exhaustion. The groom waits. He does not cheer. He just pulls off your bridle with quiet hands and says, "Well done." You lean into him, not from weakness, but from knowing you can. That night, you dream only of hooves, striking the ground, striking history, striking silence. The camp after battle is not the same place you left. It's quieter, but not restful. Still, but not calm. There's the sound of wood being mended, leather being stitched, wounds being bound. Men walk slower now, speaking less. Some don't speak at all. The fire crackles louder than it should. You return caked in mud and sweat, every muscle tight, every breath a labor. The groom meets you at the edge of the field with a bucket of water and a face that gives nothing away. He doesn't ask what happened. He already knows. He removes your tack with hands that tremble a little more than usual. Your barding is dented. A bit of blood, someone else's, is dried into the edge. He doesn't mention it. He just pats your neck and says, "You did all right, lad. You're not sure if you did. You're just glad you're upright." You are led to the far edge of the camp where the horses rest. Those who returned. Some are limping. Some don't move much. A young gelding near the trough keeps jerking his head up at shadows. You remember him. He used to flick his tail with pride. Today it hangs still. You drink deeply. The water is warm, but clean enough. Then you lower yourself, slowly, stiffly, onto a patch of straw. The groom rubs your legs with salve. His touch is gentler now. He's not fixing you. He's thanking you. Tonight's historical fact. After battle, war horses were given what little comfort medieval armies could offer. This often meant warm water, rest, and having wounds treated with poultices made from herbs or vinegar-soaked rags. A valuable destrier was seen as an investment worth preserving, and mourning if lost. Your quirky tidbit. There are records of knights composing poems in honor of their fallen horses, even giving them names that translated to things like Stormfoot or Mooncharger. One noble kept a lock of his steed's mane braided into his belt until the end of his days. Historians still argue whether the bond between knight and horse was as deep as described in romantic literature. Some argue it was largely symbolic. Others point to journals, artwork, and even battlefield records, noting the fate of individual horses as evidence of genuine attachment. You rest. The groom drapes a blanket over you, even though the night isn't. Cold. Sir Aldrich passes by once. He stops briefly, says nothing, just bows his head and moves on. You don't need words from him. You didn't charge for him. You charged because it was your role, because you were bred to do it, trained to do it, trusted to do it, and you did. The moon rises, the camp mends. You lie still. Your breath slows. And for the first time in days, you sleep without dreaming. There's no more armor today. No flags, no drums, no tense silences before the charge. Just the creak of a wooden gate, the warm slap of sun on your back, and the lazy hum of bees somewhere near a patch of thistles. You're not part of the cavalry anymore. You're a retired warhorse, or as the groom calls it, a veteran with opinions and a stiff left hock. You're not entirely sure when it happened. The transition was slow, fewer marches, less polishing, a saddle that stayed on the rack more than your back. Then one day, you weren't on the roster. You were on a list, a quiet list. Horses to be rehomed, reassigned, or remembered. You ended up here, a manor estate on the edge of nowhere. A stone barn, a crooked paddock, and a stable boy who talks to you like you're a wise uncle. The groom came with you, at least for a while, said he owed you a retirement, and frankly, you agreed. Now, your days are mostly grass, sun, and sighing at younger horses who've never seen a flag, let alone a battlefield. They prance and toss their heads when birds fly too close. You just flick your ear and keep chewing. There's a hitch in your gait now. Not pain exactly, but memory. Your joints remember what your mind forgets. The ache from a hard landing, the twinge of a tight turn, the echo of hooves pounding into soaked earth. Tonight's historical fact. When war horses aged out of combat, their fates varied. Some were gifted to monasteries or retired to noble estates. Others were reassigned to lighter duties like cart pulling or ceremonial roles. The most fortunate lived out their days grazing in quiet pastures, tended to by former squires or grooms. Your quirky tidbit. A French knight in the 1300s reportedly hosted a retirement feast for his steed, complete with carved turnips, garlands, and a serenade by 2 lute players. The horse, unimpressed, tried to eat the tablecloth. The knight declared him a creature of high taste. Historians still argue whether retirement was common or just idealized in literature. Some war horses likely worked until collapse. Others were indeed honored and cared for. One surviving account describes a noblewoman tending personally to her husband's steed for a decade after the knight's death. You get brushed regularly now, not for polish, but comfort. The new stable hand isn't as skilled as the groom, but he tries. He talks too much. You don't mind. Sometimes, when the wind shifts, you smell saddle oil, hear distant hoofbeats in your dreams, but mostly you listen to bees. Watch the grass sway. Feel the sun press against the worn spots in your coat. No one calls you to charge anymore. You don't miss it. Not really. Only sometimes. Only briefly. But then a bird lands nearby and chirps twice. You flick your tail. and it is enough. The abbey is quiet, the kind of quiet that settles in layers, bell chimes melting into breeze, sandals whispering across stone, and prayers murmured like soft rainfall. This is your new home now, a monastery tucked between fog and farmland. They didn't know quite what to do with you when you arrived, a former warhorse in a cloister. You expected stables, a saddle, maybe some chores. Instead, you got Brother Tom. He greeted you with a bow, a carrot, and a string of Latin you didn't understand. You chewed slowly, tried not to look too unimpressed, and decided to follow him anyway. Here, you don't march, you meander, through stone courtyards, across mossy paths, past monks who bless you as you pass. They call you Equus Pacis, horse of peace. A far cry from the armoured blur you once were. Brother Tom is your caretaker now. He sings to you in the mornings, not well, but earnestly. Gregorian chant with the occasional off-key la thrown in. You listen with tolerance. Occasionally, you nod. He takes this as divine approval. You carry herbs to the garden now. Sometimes firewood. Occasionally, a sleepy novice who fell asleep leaning on your flank and got scooped up like a forgotten scroll. You don't mind. Your tack is simple. Woolen, rope, smooth leather worn soft from rain and time. No iron, no crests, just utility and rhythm. Tonight's historical fact. It was not uncommon for retired war horses to be donated to monasteries or religious orders. These horses were repurposed for agricultural work, ceremonial use, or simply kept as honoured animals of peace. Their strength and training made them ideal companions for quiet, sacred labour. Your quirky tidbit? One Benedictine record tells of a horse that rang the monastery bell by walking in a circle connected to a gear mechanism. The monks claimed it knew the hours of prayer better than the abbot. The horse's name, amusingly, was Benedictus the Loud. Historians still argue about the prevalence of war horses in religious communities. Some say they were rare gifts. Others claim they were quietly accepted by orders who valued work over origin. A few texts even suggest that certain abbots preferred destriers over donkeys for their disciplined silence. You find the silence. Here, agreeable. There are no sudden horns, no lances, no shouting men atop shouting men. Just the soft cluck of chickens, the rustle of cassocks, the chime of distant bells. Brother Tom brushes you slowly in the evenings, talking to you about St. Francis and the stars. You don't understand, but the rhythm of his voice is enough. You close your eyes. The stone wall is cool against your shoulder, and in the distance, someone sings out the evening prayer. You don't join in, but you listen, because sometimes peace arrives not with a horn, but with a carrot and a hymn. Ceremony finds you again, not with banners or drums this time, but with silk gloves, velvet cloaks, and the distinct scent of expensive perfume drifting down from powdered courtiers who have never known what it's like to run full tilt towards a wall of spears. You've been summoned back to court, not to charge, not to joust, to appear. You are no longer a war horse or even a beast of burden. You are a relic of glory, a symbol, a mobile monument to past victories. You're not entirely sure how you feel about that, but the apples are frequent, and the grooming is excellent. You are brushed until your coat shines like lacquer. Your mane is braided into elaborate loops. Someone adds a tiny golden medallion to your bridle. You try to eat it. You are gently discouraged. Today, you're to appear in a royal parade, a procession of victors, lords, and notable creatures of note, which apparently now includes you. Your title? Veteran Mount of the Realm. It sounds impressive. It mostly means you walk slowly past people who point and whisper things like, "Is that the one from Grey Hollow?" You don't correct them. You've never been to Grey Hollow. You carry no one today, just yourself. And you walk with the kind of quiet dignity only a horse who's been sneezed on by 4 different knights can carry. Tonight's historical fact. In late medieval courts, especially during festivals or political events, famous war horses were sometimes paraded as symbols of national pride. These animals were recognized publicly, their names recorded alongside their riders in chronicles and poems. Your quirky tidbit. One warhorse, named Marchwind, was given an honorary velvet shoe to wear during ceremonies, despite protests from the grooms who claimed he kept trying to eat it. Another was granted a seat of honor at a banquet. He reportedly fell asleep standing during dessert. Historians still debate how much of this pomp was genuine honor versus clever public relations. Some horses were truly revered, others were likely used as pageantry props. But many noble houses kept portraits of their war horses hung beside family tapestries. You pause beneath an archway. Musicians play softly nearby. Children throw flower, petals. You try to eat one. The groom, yes, he came back for this, gently swats your nose. "Not today, old man," he mutters, but he's smiling. The parade continues. You walk with the slow, sure steps of someone who's seen too much to be rushed. When the trumpets flare, you don't flinch. When the crowd applauds, you flick one ear politely. And when it ends, and they remove the golden medallion, you're led back to a quiet courtyard shaded by orange trees. The groom untacks you with care. "You did all right," he says, brushing dust from your mane. "Still got it." You snort. He laughs. In the distance, someone begins to sing. Not for you, but you listen anyway. Because even symbols like to be seen. The weather turns. Rain comes in low and sideways, soaking everything it touches and making even the stones feel like wet cloth. You huddle beneath the overhang of a barn, nose tucked in, tail twitching at the rhythm of dripping water. Your joints ache a little more than usual. Not from glory, just age. The monks say it's the changing season. The groom says it's the damp. The truth is probably both. You've lived through 100 of these by now, give or take a few decades and one very eventful summer siege. It's during one of these chilly, wet mornings that the veterinarian arrives. Not the sharp-tongued blacksmith who mutters about frogs in the hoof. This one is quiet, gentle, smells like dried herbs and travel dust, carries scrolls instead of shoes. Her hands are soft, but her eyes are sharp. She checks your legs first, then your teeth, then your breath. She speaks softly the whole time, mostly to herself, but sometimes to you. Good weight. Still chewing evenly. Coughs a little sticky. You blink at her slowly. She nods. Then she pulls out the medicine pouch. Now the fun begins. Tonight's historical fact. Medieval veterinary care was a patchwork of folk knowledge, herbal remedies, and early anatomy studies. Horse doctors, or marshals, combined. Observation with superstition. Common treatments included honey salves, vinegar compresses, and concoctions made of wine, garlic, and boiled twigs. It was more art than science. Your quirky tidbit. One popular remedy for hoof rot involved tying a live eel around the horse's leg to draw out the foul humours. Another recommended whispering the Lord's Prayer 3 times while rubbing ashes into the mane. Horses were patient creatures until the eels came out. Historians still argue whether medieval equine medicine had meaningful effect or was mostly placebo for the rider's conscience. Some remedies were surprisingly effective. Others caused more harm than good, like the use of lead or mercury-based ointments, which were believed to revitalize the spirit. Back in your stable, the veterinarian gently rubs a pungent paste into your joints. It smells like old soup and mustard seeds. You try to pretend it helps immediately. She chuckles. She offers you a sliver of dried apple as a reward. You take it without hesitation. Old horses know better than to waste kindness. The groom returns with a dry blanket and a half-hearted insult about your theatrical limp. You swat him with your tail. Everyone is comforted by the normalcy. Outside, the rain slows. Inside, you stand warmer than before. Your bones still ache. But someone noticed. Someone cared. And that matters more than the weather. Night falls over the barn like a soft woolen cloak. The air hums with stories, not spoken aloud, but passed in, the creaks of old beams, in the gentle snorts of sleeping animals, and in the rustle of hay being turned by restless hooves. You lie in your stall, the lantern flickering above, and listen. This is the hour when tales are told, not by knights around fires, but by the horses themselves. You've heard them all by now. The young chestnut 2 stalls down insists he descended from a charger who once outran a siege. The roan mare with the crooked blaze claims she bit a king once, though the stable hands say it was a cook. And the shaggy grey gelding in the corner tells his story every week, about the river crossing, the broken bridge, and how he carried his rider back blindfolded. No one questions him. Even if it's not true, it feels true. You don't say much, but when the wind shifts just right, you remember. The field of lances, the clang of steel, the thundering charge, the moment when everything narrowed to hooves, breath, and earth. You remember your first tournament, the time Sir Aldrich got his foot stuck in the stirrup, and you had to calmly lower yourself to the ground, like a collapsing tent just to let him free. You remember the banners, the mud, the days that smelled of vinegar and wood smoke and possibility. Tonight's historical fact: while horses can't share tales as humans do, their roles in oral history are often preserved through stable culture, stories passed down by handlers, grooms, and fellow soldiers, tales of heroic mounts, impossible feats, and miraculous survivals became folklore within stables across medieval Europe. Your quirky tidbit: some grooms swore certain horses could sense battle long before horns blew. One tale recounts a gelding that refused to leave its stall on the eve of a lost skirmish. Others claimed that elder horses would stomp their hooves rhythmically during storms, telling their own battle stories through motion. Historians still argue about how much memory animals retain, especially war horses. Some suggest they form emotional memories tied to smells, sounds, and routines. Others believe tales of heroic instinct were human projections, stories we told ourselves about the beasts we needed to believe in. But here, in the quiet of the barn, it doesn't matter whether it's fact or fancy. You hear the creak of a stall, door swinging, the shuffling of hooves settling in straw, a nicker from a corner, a snort of acknowledgement. The stable tells stories in breath and rhythm, and tonight you are the elder, the one who saw, the one who remembers, not through words, but through stillness and sleep, and the way the air pauses just slightly when you shift your weight, as if listening, as if it knows that one more legend is being gently folded into the hay. Morning arrives like mist, quiet, patient, wrapping itself around you before you realize it's come. The sun filters in through the slats of the stable wall, painting long stripes across the straw. It's warm today, the kind of warm that invites Slow thoughts and slower movements. You stretch your legs one at a time. You don't get up fast anymore. You haven't in years. But when you stand, you do so with purpose. The way only someone who has earned rest knows how. The groom is already in the yard, humming tunelessly and cursing at a bucket that insists on tipping. He's older now. So are you. You match each other, creak for creak. He greets you the same way he always has. Still breathing then, you nod. He tosses you a carrot. You catch it with mild enthusiasm. Even old jaws enjoy something sweet. You're not expected to do anything today. No ceremonies, no parades, no boys yelling, "Yeah!" from your back with dreams of glory. Just a walk in the pasture, if you like. And you do. The grass is softer now. Or maybe you're just kinder to it. You pause every few steps to breathe in the scent of the earth, the trees, the faint spice of dandelions. A butterfly lands on your nose. You go cross-eyed for a moment trying to watch it, then sneeze softly. It flutters off, unbothered. This is it. Not the end, exactly, but the gentlest part of the journey, where the world slows down to your rhythm, where your hoofprints fade as soon as you make them, and no one minds. Tonight's historical fact. Many retired war horses, when given proper care, lived out their final years in peace. Pastures attached to monasteries, noble estates, or the occasional sanctuary. These horses, while no longer symbols of might, became emblems of endurance, loyalty, and quiet pride. Your quirky tidbit. One ancient horse was so beloved in retirement that local children were brought to feed him apples every summer festival. When he passed, they tied red ribbons in the paddock gate for a week. The groom planted rosemary beside his watering trough. It still grows crooked. Historians still argue over the lives of aging war horses, whether they were honored or forgotten, cherished or repurposed. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. But for some, the ending was soft, safe, gentle. You graze a little more, then you lie down, not from exhaustion, but because the sun is warm and the grass is just that comfortable. A soft breeze stirs your mane. The stable creaks behind you. Somewhere nearby, a robin sings. And for once, you don't remember battlefields or banners or shouting men. You remember a patch of clover, and a boy with a bucket, and a long, slow walk home. Now, the story settles, like the dust of a long ride drifting back to earth. The hooves are still, the horns are quiet. The grass rises again where it was pressed, and you, listener, are still here with me. You've walked through the life of a warhorse, not the thundering charge or the painted glory, but the daily, quietly heroic moments. You've felt the bite of armor straps and the ache of old wounds. You've watched banners rise and fall, heard lullabies in the clang of a forge, and rested beside monks who chant for peace. But now the fields are soft. The roads have ended. And there is only the hush of evening, cool and forgiving, brushing over your back like a blanket laid down with care. You are not in battle anymore. You are not in training. You are not even on parade. You are in memory now. A warm place. A place where even the hardest days grow gentle with time. So close. Your eyes. Let your breath slow. Let the earth hold your weight for a while. No one is calling your name. No one is fitting you for anything. There is only wind, grass, and the sound of a quiet barn creaking in rhythm with the stars. You've done. Enough. You've walked far enough. You can sleep now. The field is wide, the night is still, and the stable door is always open.